In this video, we're going to look at the if function in Excel. So the if function is something that I use quite a lot, especially as a teacher, and it's a really useful skill to know how to use. So the if function is a way of doing a certain thing that you want to do based on a criteria. So for example, the example you see on the screen, we wanted to say pass if you get more than 75%, or anything else you get fail. So you want to say a different thing in a cell based on a criteria. So the if function is quite easy to do, but as you get more complicated statements, you can have a really long if statement. It can get really complicated, but as long as you're keeping track of where each statement is, you get to grips with it quite easily. So the way it works is you have equals if, so I'll just do it here. Then you've got your logical test, so that is your value. So you know, it might be the grade greater than 10 or whatever. Then what you want it to say if it's true, so it might be more than 10. Then what you want it to say if it's not, and you can leave this blank and it will say false, or you can write, you know, less than 10. Like that, close the bracket, and obviously 67 is more than 10. If I change that to 7, it'll say less than 10. So that's worked. So that's your if function. So in this task, we're looking at changing this cell here to say if you pass or fail. So I can do equals if that is greater than 75, then I'm going to say pass. Now you need to have speech marks if you want to say text. If you want to say a value, you can get away with it, I think. But if you write pass without speech marks, it gets confused. And then I'm going to put fail. Then drag it down, and you can see all the people have got 170 have passed and everybody else has failed, even the 75, because I put greater than. If I wanted to include 75, I would have to change that to greater than or equal to. So the next thing we'll look at is nested if statements, which are a little bit more complicated. Nested if statements, if I just go to here, is where you have to have an if statement inside another if statement. So we'll go to this task here. So in C4, reading that one, it needs to have a formula that will display pass if the result in B4 is greater than or equal to 5 and fail if it's not. So that's a simple if statement. So equals if B4 is greater than or equal to 5, it won't pass. Get rid of that full stop. So we've got that done. In question 2, in E4, write a formula that will display pass if the result in B4 is greater than or equal to the value in F1. Okay, so equals if the result in B4, so B4 is greater than or equal to the value in F1 here, and fail if it's not. So again, pass and fail like that. So that's worked. So the person who's got 6 has worked. However, you can see that I have got these 3 cells that I'm like working. 9 and 8 should be obviously also saying to pass. And that's going back to a previous video where we're looking at your absolute references. See here, it's looking at F1, then F2, and then F3, and it's freaking out, it's not liking it. That's because this here needs to be an absolute reference, not a relative one. So if I press F4, it puts dollar signs around it. I can then put it down, and now you see my 8, my 9, and my 6 are all saying pass, so that's fixed that one. So I'm going to skip this one here and go to question 4. So this one is a lot more complicated. This one is using an if and, okay? So it says in G4, write a formula that will display good if score 1 and score 2 are greater than or equal to 8, and the total is 17 or more. If it isn't, display poor. So this one is asking for multiple conditions. So you can do it by doing multiple if statements, or we can use an and, okay? So the and's a little bit easier. So you start with equals if, and then you do and, your brackets, and you do your first logical test. So the first one is score 1 needs to be greater than or equal to 8. Logical 2 is score 2 needs to be greater than or equal to 8. And the last one is both that cell plus that cell need to be 17 or more. So greater than 17. And close brackets there. Now if that's true, we can say good, and if it's not, we can say poor, and enter. Now if I drag this down, you'll see they all say poor, and that's because none of them are meeting all 3 of these criteria. So this one here, for example, is less than 8, greater than 8, and then equal to 17. So I change this to 10. So now you can see that James has got greater than 10 in the first one, greater than 10 in the second test, and the total is greater than 17. So that one has worked. So that's the one way of doing a nested if statement, which is probably the easiest way and probably the best way I would go about doing it. Now there is another way that you may get taught or may have seen, and it is actually nesting your if statements by doing an if within an if within an if. The way you can do that is by going equals if as normal, and then from a logical test I can start with the first criteria. So that cell is greater than or equal to 8. Now press comma and go into my value if that's true. So if it's true, I want to do the next test, because obviously if it's false, then it's not going to meet any of the criteria, so it's going to be poor. So then I do another if. So if that is greater than or equal to 8, and then my next value is true is another if, and that's if that plus that is greater than or equal to 17. Now if it's meeting all of these criteria, in here we can put good, then we need to put in the value if false. Okay, so we can put in poor. Now that if statement's finished, but now I still need to do the false value for the other ones. So again, I can just do poor, close that if statement, comma again, and you see now, if I drag that down, I'm getting exactly the same results. It works exactly the same, it's just slightly different, but it's a lot more complicated. More often than not, just because of how I've learned how to use Excel, I do this method, but this method is a lot easier if you want 3 criteria to be met. Hopefully that helped and you found that really interesting, and keep watching the videos and you'll learn some more Excel skills.